I've had a thought the other day and I jotted it down and then I'm talking about it now and here and today. And it kind of came as a bit of a surprise, a little bit, because I was in those, swimming in those waters already, like in those thoughts and ideas and connecting them in a similar way. But the kind of that almost like a eureka moment when it happened, it was like, oh wow. And it kind of is a bit heavy, even for me. Well, not even for me. It's not like yeah, anyway, it is. It definitely is heavy for me as well to talk about it. But I will anyway. So I was wondering, it kind of came about. I either read something or a thought came to me because this is kind of the waters I swim in daily, of that kind of spiritual philosophies, spirituality, higher consciousness, higher wisdom, all that stuff, esoteric worlds, etc. And Buddhism, etc. Sorry, and it just kind of hit me that love is love, right? I mean, that didn't hit me. I kind of sussed that out a while ago, but but when we love someone, um, we love them. It's like love doesn't change when we lose them. Is kind of what I'm getting at. So, if we love someone, right? I'm going to repeat it, but bear with me. And they either die, goodness forbid, or they just like, or they become ill and there is a potential of death. There is basically a loss. The fact that we are losing them is looming, or we will be losing them, and we know one way or another, whether via death or maybe just divorce or separation or all kinds of other separations. And so, but we love them, right? And yet at the same time we can start experiencing this grief. So let's stick with the most radical extreme case when we lose them as death, via death. But their grief is not, I'm putting here that their grief isn't because we love them. So that's the kind of radical, kind of heavy thing that I am not, it doesn't roll off my tongue so easily. So the grief, so what I'm proposing basically is that the grief we are feeling at a loss of someone is not because we love them. We love them. There is no because or not. We love them. But the grief we feel is because, and this is what I'm suspecting, I'm throwing out there, is that it's the guilt and shame, deeply wrongly felt so, or a better word maybe, a regret that we either haven't been able to save them or save the relationship in a milder scenario if it's a loss via separation, or if it's a illness that we didn't spot earlier, if it's that we didn't help them better about with it or whatever. So the grief I'm proposing, it's not because we lost a loved one. The grief is because of regrets that we presume for us to feel because we feel guilt, mostly guilt. I don't know about shame, but yeah, I'm sure in some cases shame, and that's just an even more extreme version of guilt. That we could have done something to save them, but we didn't. And partly the reason this is rolling off my tongue not so easily is because karmically, not in this lifetime, well, I have experienced death of dear loved ones in this lifetime. Not many, but a few, or a couple, or whatever. But anyway, but not the dearest and the closest. Not yet, thankfully. But I certainly have intense memories, cellular more than anything, kind of like energetic residue left in me of profound grief over losses of loved ones. And yes, in my case, in those stories, and in many others, as I very much double in past lives. Sorry, this is interesting. I it's a theme basically. It's this sort of grief that comes from not from losing, but we can't forgive ourselves that we couldn't help them. We couldn't save them. So I personally think that's quite radical. But maybe I just haven't read enough around the topic, what other people think. Maybe this is, a well-established fact among, well, certain circles, or just full stop. But yeah, to me, it was like, wow, because I had associated my grief through this past life kind of memory that with love, because I lost, kind of, someone very close to me in my life, like child, parent, sibling, that kind of level of closeness and importance. And the grief, the waves of grief that would come over me over the decades of my life, that I eventually identified as essentially coming from that particular storyline or past life storyline, I always attributed because I loved them. And in this lifetime, they're very important to me as well, and I love them dearly. So that's possibly what also kind of why the love played a big part in me explaining the extent of my grief. It's losing the loved one, and yes, losing the loved one is a loss, and I'm not playing it down, certainly, absolutely not. But I'm just saying, I really think that the root of this grief is guilt and shame. Shame that how could we not, beating ourselves up in that sense. Guilt that's, like I say, on steroids. And yeah, in my particular past life story, it was almost like in the movies, when someone doesn't arrive at the scene where the death occurs. You don't arrive there on time to save. Not to mention, if you did, you would just probably die yourself. That isn't the point either. Maybe I certainly know in my case, I probably would have preferred that over what happened, that I survived and that they didn't. But my point is, this has nothing to do with love, is bottom line. Grief over loss has nothing to do with loving that person that we lost. It really, I don't think there is. And yeah, I think I'll leave it to that. I think I think that's quite big and quite a relief if you think about it. But the hard part now is, but that always comes from guilt, and the survivor guilt. There is that as well. So grief is only rooted in guilt. I'm certain by the end of this, 7 minutes. Because imagine just the other side, the other scenario. Well, let's say you're incapable of feeling guilt and shame, regret, remorse. Let's say you're incapable. I know it sounds like you're a psychopath, which, there are all kinds of evidence that we all are to a point. And that definition of psychopath is whatever. Anyway, but let's just assume you're a beautiful human being, kind, generous, compassionate and good and all the rest, all the lovely stuff. But you are incapable of feeling regret, remorse, guilt, shame, etc. And then you lose one loved one. I bet myself that I would feel nothing but love. I would not feel anything else but love. I don't think I'd even be sad. Maybe be sad. I don't know about sadness, but I'm kind of, yeah, maybe. I'm leaning towards no, but that maybe is putting me in this scenario into so evolved that I might as well just be an angel or spirit guide or something. I don't know. But yeah, so if you were incapable of feeling guilt, remorse, and regret, and you lost a loved one, would you feel grief? I reckon not. All you'll feel is love. Love, love, love. That's it. That's all I have for you today. If only I could find how to end this, because it's completely, you can't see a thing. I can't anyway. Okay, till tomorrow.